podcasts.
Welcome back to the Games Explained podcast, the podcast where we talk about games and we talk about math. That one's true. We're talking about math today. We're your hosts,
Dan,
Ben,
and Matt. Today we're going to talk about topology. Ooh, it's not typography.
what was the one that I thought it was last time we had a podcast?
Topography.
Whatever.
Topography.
Isn't that what we just said?
No, it's topology.
Okay. So I'm in for a wild ride personally.
It's gonna be a good time.
I know nothing about this.
So the format of the podcast is that we talk about a game that we've played recently, and then we talk about our subject, topology. Got it. I got it this time.
So our by our I mean my and Ben's mother wins lots of contests, and recently she won 2 board games.
Oh,
Well, 3, but I benefited from 2 of them. And the benefited as in I have them in my house and I own them now because she's kind to me. And one of those 2 games is Fruit Ninja Combo Party.
what?
Which
Ooh.
I wouldn't think that a card game based off of a popular iPhone app would be a good time.
Yeah, it's especially one like that where you're literally just swiping across the screen.
Is that what the
Yes.
game is like? Do you just...
It's not like that at all. It's like for branding purposes only. But it's a decently fun party game. So there's a deck of what's 12 times 6? 72?
72.
Yeah. So 72 cards in a deck. That deck consists of 6 different fruit. There are 12 of each of those fruit in that deck. And your job is to make points. And you earn points by making combos. And your combos either have to be all cards of the same type of fruit or all different types of fruit. And as soon as you make a mistake on that combo, then your combo is done and you have to cash it in for one less. So let's say we're on round 4 and I've been collecting all pineapples. I have 3 pineapples so far. And then I place a watermelon because I have no other option. Then I have to cash it in as though it's a 3-card combo. So I make less points, and also there's 2 different means of getting points. One is tokens, and that's like guaranteed face up, this is what I get for this combo. And then there's also you draw a certain number of cards from the deck based on how good your combo is. So the better it is, you get increasingly more cards from there. If you screw up a combo, you don't get the card part of your combo. So it's a big fail to mess it up. And so how it works is it's same mechanics as like Sushi Go or 7 Wonders where you play a card and then pass your hand along. You start with 12 cards.
Drafting.
Yes, a draft and pass game. And so you don't know what's coming down the pipe and you don't know whether you should stick to the fruit that you started with or if you should branch out and get all the different ones. If you stick to the same fruit, you also get double the tokens for points. So I guess that's more risky. There's also an element of dexterity involved as well. There is the hilt of a samurai sword that's up in the middle of the table. And if the card that you reveal, let's say a kiwi, if anybody else reveals a kiwi at the exact same time as you, it's the first person to grab this thing off the middle of the table gets a bonus card.
Interesting.
So it's like Sushi Go meets spoons.
Pretty much. Pretty much. And so then there comes some strategy with that, because if I know, like if you've already put down 2 kiwis, I know what's coming next for you. So if I'm doing like a multi-fruit combo thing, I can just assume that you're playing a kiwi and flip down a kiwi and grab it like immediately, right? Without waiting. And there's a risk if you knock it over or grab it when you shouldn't have, then you get a -1 token. But it's a pretty safe bet if you're like early into your combo and I know what you're going for already to like go for that. So that's just like a bonus way of making points. So the strategy is little to basically non-existent, but but it's with the right group and the right mindset, it's lots of fun to yell at each other and grab the samurai sword thing.
Cool. That sounds fun. I like spoons.
Yes. Like your intense camp version.
Oh yeah, we played spoons where there was one person who was not participating, and they would go hide the spoons around this
That's
very
it.
large room. And so when you had a set or whatever, you put your cards down and just started running around looking for the spoons. So it's possible that you, the person who got the set, didn't find any spoons.
But the spoons are up for grabs for anyone as soon as one person gets the set, right?
That's right.
That's wild.
And the rule was you didn't have to just find the spoons, you had to successfully bring them back to your sitting spot.
So you'd be like tackling each other along the way.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Full contact spoons.
Full contact spoons.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, or before they were being hidden, it started because someone went for the spoons but just grabbed all of them and just threw them across the room. And that's how that was spawned. Yep. So a game I've been playing is Terraforming Mars.
I've heard about this.
Sounds
I
interesting.
don't know much though.
It's a beast. It's like 4 hours. There's lots of juicy mechanics. The fiction is really fun. You are all together terraforming Mars. And the game ends when it has a certain amount of oxygen and the temperature is steady at a certain amount. And then there was one other thing. Yeah, so you're all working toward the end of the game, but you need to get more points than the other people before that happens. So some strategy is try to get as many of those early points as you can and just blitz those 3 properties to the end and just end the game as fast as you can. And the others are like, don't actually do the terraforming, but do all the other researchy things and get points that way.
So it's like semi-cooperative.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the fiction is pretty cooperative, but the mechanics aren't as much.
So for a game with that much depth, do you feel like there is a barrier for like? What was your first experience with the game like? Was it okay? Not having played it before.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. 'Cause things build as you go. Like there's lots of cards to read and lots of details, and you have to figure out like if I get this card, does it work well with that other card? And
Yeah.
but like by the end of the game, each turn was like, okay, I do this, and then that gives me this thing, and you do all these things.
Cool.
But at the start, it was like, I have this one thing, I'm gonna put my token on it. It's your turn.
Yeah, with a game that long and I assume that complicated, it's like you can't take the time to explain every single little piece of the game before you start playing it, or else you'll never start playing it.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
like you're sort of going in blind to some degree as far as like, I don't know about this thing that's coming up on this card that I'm going to draw that gives me this benefit, because I'm not going to go and sit and look through the whole deck before we play
Yeah.
this 4-hour game, right?
And there were times where I bought something and I was like, hey, I bought this thing. How do I use it? What does it do? And then I'd figure it out and then we'd keep playing. And it was impressive because the scores were somewhere around 100 or something. At least large double digits. And the final score was 3 people tied for first and 1 person 1 point away for second
Whoa.
place.
Wow, that is extremely close.
Yeah.
It's like it was cooperative all along.
And you don't really know how, like the score does go up over time, but there's enough of those end game points that you just can't calculate ahead of time, so you don't know exactly who's going to win.
Right, yeah.
Either that game is incredibly balanced or that's just a huge fluke. I don't know. I was very impressed.
That was your
Nice.
first time playing it?
Yeah.
Cool.
Did you play with some veterans?
I did. Two other people playing had played many times, and 2 of us were brand new.
Nice.
Yeah, Terraforming Mars.
Well, speaking of games that are new to people, a few months ago I played a game for the first time. I believe it's called Torres. I think it's Spanish for tower. It's a game where you are trying to build these kind of abstract castles and place your knights as high in the castle as possible. And then at the end of each round, there's something like 4 or 5 rounds in the game. You are adding up your score for the round, and your score is determined largely by how high your knights are in the castle. And on your turn, you have the option to place a piece of castle, place a new knight, and I think you start off with 5 or 6 knights. Or you can move a knight, or you can draw an action card that you can use later on, or you can play an action card, or you can just earn a victory point or something like that. Yeah, it was a really interesting game because of how you are able to move around in this game. When you build your castle, you have to build it such that it essentially forms a stairway. You can't just keep building the castle on top of each other to make a gigantic tower. When you're moving your knights around, they have to step up kind of like a step on a staircase. So basically every tower has to have that staircase that exists, but you also can't walk through another knight. So what people often do is they'll get the high ground right away, and then they'll try and build up high ground next to themselves and just kind of do stepping stones next to each other so that they kind of build an isolation that way, and then they block it off. So if anyone else builds a new staircase up to them, then they can't get up to the highest spot in the tower. And what was really fascinating about it was how once you've got a tower started, what you can do is part of your move is move through the tower. Each one of these tower segments has little archways in it. And so you can enter the archway on the current level and come out anywhere else on the same level within that block. And that is like a little teleportation thing that lets you get past other knights that may be in the tower. And if you fall off the end and fall out down to a lower level, that's fine. You just can't teleport up. And it's just really fascinating to be able to tunnel underneath stuff and get around things.
So, sorry, are you building one tower together, or there's separate towers?
There's several towers, but you can infiltrate each other's towers. I think there's something like 6 or 8 starting spots where towers can start, and eventually they'll merge. And there's some actions that'll like destroy parts of towers or move tower pieces or whatever.
That's cool.
Yeah, that game's really fun because the topology of the game changes as you go.
Yeah, the whole landscape of the castle changes, right?
Yeah. That brings us to our theme of the day, which is topology.
Yeah, there's a lot of games that have really interesting topology to them. Most people are used to. Maybe we should define topology.
Yes, for the
first.
uninitiated.
Oh, yes.
Like myself.
We'll explain it in terms of Torres.
Yeah, so with many board games where you're moving figures around on a map, you've got a 2D surface or a grid that you're moving your figures around on. You're moving one space at a time or something like that, and it's confined within an area that's got an outer perimeter that bounds things in. That's kind of like the standard topology or layout or area that you're working with. It's a 2D surface. Torres is interesting because it adds that third dimension where you can walk underneath things and you're building stuff in that third vertical dimension, which adds a new horizontal dimension that you can go through. So it's fairly unique in that perspective.
Mm-hmm. Like when you start the game, you move up, down, left, right. They're all the same. Mm-hmm. But eventually you can move in through a building for one action,
right,
which teleports you. So now the topology has changed. Like it's not it still looks like a grid, but it doesn't act like a grid.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you're mapping out your available move space, and you can move up to 5 spaces on a normal like checkerboard grid, moving 5 spaces essentially just makes you a circle. But in this area where you can do teleportation, then your 5 spaces radius essentially is no longer a circle shape. It's a weird blob that's got an extra blob at the ends of all these tunnels.
Mm-hmm. Like if it was Euclidean, if you move left, up, right, and down, you'd end up at the same spot. Whereas in Torres, if you move up through a building and then right and down and left, you could end up somewhere entirely different.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like checkers. The topology changes as you're able to hop over other pieces.
Right.
So instead of moving just one space, now there's that much board you can get to. Or in chess, each piece has its own topology that it's acting on, basically.
That's an interesting way of thinking of it. Yeah.
Like the bishops only go on that one color, so to them the other squares don't even exist. That's not part of their like navigable space.
Yeah, so then there's games like Tsuro, where you are all placed around the outer edge of a board, and your task is to put down a tile that then moves whoever is next to that tile along a straight line. So your player piece actually only ever moves in not a straight line, I should say, but a one-dimensional line. and eventually it might join up with another line, and then you run off the board and you've lost the game, or you're winding around somewhere else, and you're building the board as you go in that sort of game, essentially.
So tell me about the difference between topology and topography, if you will.
Oh, okay. Topography is like the elevation changes on a map.
Okay.
So you'd be like, it's low over there. That's a mountain over there. That's a lake. Whereas the road system that's drawn on a map can have a totally different topology.
Yeah.
That's the one.
You can think about it, the endings of the words ology and ography. Ology is the academic studying of a thing, and ography is the actual like record keeping or recording of a thing.
Sure. Okay.
So they that root word topo is the way a thing is shaped.
Sure. Okay.
And so that's what's common between the two, but the actual implications of the words are a little bit different.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can give you a road example.
Okay.
So I can say from here to downtown is 10 kilometers.
Okay.
And it's always going to be 10 kilometers. Right now, it's about 20 minutes away, whereas at rush hour it's about 30 minutes away.
That's the topology.
Yeah.
Now I'm starting to get it.
Yeah. So the distance from here to outskirts of town is the distance is the same, and then the time is going to stay the same too.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That does make sense to me.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and one last example, if you ever look at the map for a public transit system, it's never showing roads in the actual winding and bending that roads have. It shows the point-to-point connections that the routes take in very simplified directions.
Sure.
So
okay.
Those public transit maps are topological maps,
Okay.
not topographical maps.
Right. Yes, that makes sense.
So it's like a different type of distance.
Cool.
Something cool that happens in games is where the topology can change. So in Seven Wonders, you interact with the person on your left and your right, and that's always the same. Whereas in Bang, or Bang the Dice game, when someone gets knocked out, all of a sudden the topology is changed because someone new is beside you.
Oh.
And someone new is 2 spaces away from you, and so you can interact with that.
Yeah.
And as the game gets smaller and smaller, all of a sudden everyone is beside you.
Right. Is that so? All right. Let me throw an example at you, and you tell me if this is topology. Colt Express.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely.
As like in Colt Express, if you're, I don't have much experience with it, but like if you're inside of a train car, you can typically, like, if you, for example, shoot your gun, you can only hit somebody like really close to you. But if you're on top of the train car, you could shoot all the way across to somebody who's like at the very front.
Yeah.
So the topology changes whether you're on the main level or above the train cars.
Yeah, because your physical distance it can be the same, but your like reach is different.
Yeah, your influence range. Yeah.
So yeah, just by having those two, like if you had to stay inside the train cars, that game would not be very interesting.
Yeah, it would be pretty static.
Yeah.
Cool.
Another cool example is Risk. So Risk, famous. It's got Australia with one way to get in. It's got North America or South America that goes north to North America and then across to Africa, and all those things, right? All those connections. StarCraft Risk is topologically identical, but visually flipped left to right, and everything looks like planets instead. So you look at it and you're like, oh, this is a totally different game. Like,
But it's
where's
literally the same
Australia?
map.
Yeah, it's just flipped over.
How did you discover that?
I compared them side by side. So in StarCraft Risk, there's effectively an Australia. Like there's one planet where there's 4 places to be on it, and there's only one connection to this big planet with lots of connections. And so you can play it like it's Risk because the topology is the same.
That's really funny.
But they knew, like, the topology was proven,
Right.
but they needed it to look unique. And
That's
so they did
smart.
it.
Then there's also games like Ticket to Ride. There's the European map, and then there's the North America map. So there, it's the exact same game. Actually, no, there is there are some slight differences with the North American map, I think, right? There's like tunnels
some
or something.
special rules for the
Europe
European
one
one.
has
Yeah.
tunnels. But that adds, it's the same core mechanics, but then by changing up the map and adding a couple little twists to it, they're able to make a different feeling game.
Because you play on a different topology.
Yeah, exactly. And similarly, Carcassonne has a lot of expansions that add like tunnels and different city-shaped pieces and whatnot that change how that game plays. Where a field, normally when you've got a thing that caps off a city, it might also cap off a field. But with the new expansions, you end up having a field that can merge through a thing. And yeah, another way that I've seen people doing interesting twists of topology on a classic game. A number of years ago, this was making its rounds on the internet. There was a website that allowed you to play tic-tac-toe on different topologies. So normally you're playing it on a 3x3 grid where you've got bounds on the outside of the grid. But this website allowed you to take that grid and wrap it in different ways. And so you could play effectively like you're on the outside of a cylinder. So the left and right sides joined up. But the top and bottom stayed open.
Oh.
Or you could play it on a sphere, so that the left and right wrapped around and the top and bottom wrapped around. Or you could even play it on a Klein bottle or a Mobius strip. So a Mobius strip, we'll start with.
Right. I will say, actually, I'll interject. As I was looking on my phone trying to figure out the difference between these two things, a Mobius strip is what came up as the image for topology.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
very interesting to me. But anyway, continue. And,
So-
and also describe a Mobius strip too, just so we know.
So yeah, a Mobius strip is an object or I guess it's an object where it's effectively a straight strip, but it only has a single surface in 3D space. So if you had just like a bracelet, it would have an outer surface and an inner surface. If you cut it in one spot and gave it a half twist, then now you have just a single surface. If you start on the outside and you follow it all the way along, you'd end up on the inside, and then you'd end up back on the outside.
Right. Yeah.
So with the tic-tac-toe on a Mobius strip, you're essentially connecting the left and right, but when you're connecting it, you're flipping the top and bottom. So if you're had the top middle, top right, and bottom left, that would be a connection for the tic-tac-toe.
Oh my gosh.
A Klein bottle is the four-dimensional version of a Mobius strip, essentially. So in addition to the left and right connecting and then having a flip, the top and bottom are also connected. I don't think there's a flip involved there, but in 4D space, it's essentially a three-dimensional surface or a three-dimensional object that you could look at as like a mug. But the mug has an inner surface and an outer surface. A Klein bottle just has the one surface.
Huh.
Look it up on Google. It's an interesting looking shape.
I will do that.
Yeah, so that was a fascinating way. Like tic-tac-toe is a game that like it's solved once you know how to play it.
Yeah.
You can win or tie every game. But once you introduce this topological quirk, then suddenly it becomes a much more interesting game again. Until you solve it again, I'm sure it's solvable. But
Yeah. I'm glad that there are variations of tic-tac-toe. Also, on a slightly small side tangent, I have 2 games on my smartwatch. One of them is tic-tac-toe, and one of them is Sudokus. The Sudokus you can't save games on. Tic-tac-toe you can save your game on.
Oh my!
In what world do you not have enough time to finish a single game of tic-tac-toe in one sitting?
so funny.
Anyway, that's
like
just
Especially with the
an aside.
interface on a watch. Like, and is it even a touchscreen one? This is like the original,
it's not.
it's the original Pebble or
It's
whatever.
like the first Pebble.
Yeah,
Anyway, sorry for that aside there.
that's great.
Another game that plays with topology in a fun way is Forbidden Island, which is a game where a bunch of tiles are laid out, and as the game progresses, those tiles will be removed. And so you just can't travel there anymore. So you have to go around it. So now a route that maybe you were using where it was really quick to get from one side to the other, now you have to go all the way around. And so the topology has changed. And then there's a swimmer character that treats those empty spaces as teleportation opportunities, basically. So the more spaces are gone, the more things are suddenly connected for that character. And so you have multiple characters basically playing on a different topology, and you have to work together.
That's cool.
That's cool. And it's also there's another game, Forbidden Desert, I think. And in that one, there's like windstorms or something that blow sand around. And then like these sand tiles stack up on the squares of the map, where if a square is like bare by itself, you could use the benefits of that square. Like you can search for the parts to fix your ship or something like this. It's been a long time since I played this game, but it works something like that. But then if there's like sand will start building up in these places, you have to dig through the sand to get to your objective underneath and stuff like that. So yeah, again, shifting what is there on the field.
In the game Survive, Escape from Atlantis, that's another game where the board that you can walk on easily shrinks and shrinks, and you have to swim to get to the edges of the board, and there's sea monsters and stuff.
Oh man.
And swimming is expensive. Like you can only have each swimmer move one space per turn. So the game gets tougher and tougher because the distance gets greater and greater in terms of how many turns it takes to get to the end. So at the beginning, you gotta just sprint, because at the end it's going to be a struggle. So at this point in the podcast, we like to think about what games we wish existed based on the theme. So what kind of creative topologies do you wish existed?
Sort of along the lines of like the tic-tac-toe, where you have interesting wrappings around of stuff. I often think of like, from a video game perspective, if you had something where it was like, you played soccer, but instead of on a rectangle, it was on the inside of a tube, or I guess on the outside of a tube would work similarly. Although the inside means you could pass kind of across vertically,
fun.
which would be interesting. But I'm sure there's a board game that could be interesting that way too, where you have something that like wraps around on the inside and you can get to the other side. I guess in some ways, things like Clue, where you have the teleporting from like one corner to the other, it sort of does that. But I guess what I'm thinking of is something where it's a full edge to the other edge, whereas it's if there's no break in it anywhere.
It's like that old Mario versus game.
Yeah.
Where you you play on a topological cylinder, because you go off to the left and you end up on the right side of the screen.
That's yeah.
Now you've got the
that makes sense. Yeah, it's interesting because you talking about like a cylindrical surface, my mind instantly thinks of a board game that is a tube. But like, yeah, like you're saying, the like a Risk board represents a sphere.
Right, yeah.
But because you can travel from one side to the other, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a teleport. Like if you're just thinking about the board itself, you are teleporting from one side to the other, but
yeah, but the same way that you're teleporting from North America to Europe.
Interesting,
right? It's still just a line that connects between the two.
So maybe there's like some really cool black hole bending space and time, like interstellar style representation of like space travel game. You know what I'm saying?
Something that warps the fourth dimension of time that actually like,
so if you weren't confused enough thinking about a cylinder on a flat surface.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. Like I guess it would just be different forms of teleporting at that point to represent moving from this plane to this one. Like over here is my x-axis part of the board, and here's my y, and here's my my z.
Well, I'm almost thinking like monopolies go to jail, like you lose a few turns essentially. That is one way to warp time a little bit for a single player.
Yeah.
There are ways that it could potentially be done that are not that outlandish to think about.
Right.
Like Candyland, when you land on that special square and you get to like take the shortcut. Topology.
I talked about the farming game a long time ago and how it was weird because like you progress around. It's like roll your dice and move your player around the board, and you move at different paces. But the board, like it's a 4-sided board, and each side is a different season. So one player is like progressed to winter, and another player is still in spring at the same time. So hey, there's your time bending
there you go,
topology right there.
Found it.
Farming game had it the whole time.
Yep.
I would like a game where it's a cooperative but competitive game. I guess a team game but each person moves differently. Like one could be an airship, one could be a motorcycle, and one could be someone just walking.
Yeah.
And so roads are the easiest way to get around. That's a motorcycle. And for the other, paths through forest are just as easy as walking on the side of a road. And for the other one, it's a plane, and they really don't care.
But they have to go in more or less straight lines or something weird, or
Or they have to go in nice arcs, like the TIE Fighter game.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I love asymmetric games.
Well, Topology. It's distance, but not distance. It's bent time. All that tasty stuff. Yeah. Thanks for opening my mind today, you guys.
I love it.
Mine has been opened more than ever before on this podcast, I think.
Awesome.
Yeah, we're Games Explained. Tune in next time where we talk about
Snowmen.
Snowman.
There should be a board game where the board is like 3 spheres mounted on each other, and that is the surface of the playing field.
That's some intense topology.
There you go.
Topical. See you next time.